Yesterday, we discussed about the basic infrastructure of Angular application and workspace. So we done with workspace and so today we will see the basic architecture of Angular application. How do we start with work with? So we learned how the Angular application starts. So the complete setup and how we can start with the application. Hope up to that point everyone achieved no problems in creating an application, creating workspace. Every one of you have practiced that. You don't have any issues, right? Right, good. Okay. So when you run ngserve, you need to keep all your commands, capitalization, everything correctly, right? Right. So if anything is mismatched, you cannot use that, right? Uh, Fine. So today we will see the basic architecture, how we can configure and run. Sometimes when you are installing the project, creating the project, due to some your network issues, it terminates in between. That means sometimes what happens is it is unable to download and add all the packages, right? So this is, you need to make sure that it is completely installed with all the library. So then you can once try. What happens if any time, if any package is missing, if it is having errors, you can do one more thing. What you can do is you can run the command npm. We can run the command npm install. Npm install. You can just run this command npm install. So what it will do is it will install the packages that are present in package.json. So corrupted ones can be updated and configured. That I will show you. Then you can understand later whenever issue comes, right? Yeah. How to set up the environment for workspace and all. It's ready. We discussed about all the basic points. Now today we will see how Angular application works. So that means the basic architecture. So and Angular components, what we are having. So Angular application architecture. So we are going to discuss about how Angular application actually works. So once you know how Angular application works, then you can understand how it starts with, how we can start with. So first we will see the Angular application architecture, then we will see the repository of application. Repository of application. That means yesterday We discussed the high level files which are available, the high level files which are available, right? So you created this workspace, and what is this Angular in that workspace, Vishnu? What is your workspace name? You have to generate a project in that workspace, not in another subfolder. I hope you are clear, right? Where you configure the workspace, there you have to create your application. Okay, right. Yeah. So now let's see the basic architecture. So how this Angular architecture works. The basic architecture of Angular, how Angular works. So you need to understand the architecture, and this is the architecture of Angular. What is it? I will explain the process. We will see how this entire concept works. So technically, this is the basic Angular architecture. The overview I will show you, means the process I will show you how this happens actually, how that happens. For that, you need to understand the complete infrastructure of Angular components. So after learning about how to create a project, now these points are important to understand how it actually works. Usually, we generally have modules. We generally have modules. We have modules. Technically, a module comprises of properties. So properties. So and it comprises of all the functions. A module comprises of properties, methods, functions, a set of classes, contracts, templates. So contracts, templates, all these are present. All these are present in a module. Already we know that module comprises of all these. Technically, so we have an Angular application. So Angular application. This Angular application we need to build by using these modules actually. Directly, how this entire process works. What we do is from the modules, these modules are actually injected into services. Services. These modules are actually injected into services. They are injected into services. Technically, service is nothing but, in general, it is a set of, you can say that it is a simple business logic which contains a set of functionalities. Detailing we will see later. A service contains a predefined business logic with some predefined functions to handle specific functionality. So it contains a reusable logic. So a service comprises of several functions with different functionalities. These are all provided by services. Service contains a set of functions with predefined functionality. Now these services will get the information, will get the contracts, means the services are built by using the contracts and the templates and the classes provided by modules. So modules are injected into service, and services are built for handling specific functionalities, different functionalities. Now these services we have to use in our application. Angular application actually it uses components. Technically we will detailedly learn about all this, means we will have a separate session on modules, we will have a separate session on services, we will have a separate session on components. Then we can get more idea on them. We will detailedly discuss about them. We have to detailedly discuss about them, right? As of now, just you need to understand module comprises of contracts, templates, and their implementation. So we import the modules and design services. Service contains the logic with some predefined functionality. Now these functionalities I want to use in our application. We want to use them in the application. Then we will not directly use the services in our application. Usually what we do, so these services are injected into a component. They are injected into a component. Actually, component comprises of presentation. It comprises of presentation. It comprises of logic, and it comprises of styles. All these are designed as a component. So a component contains presentation, logic, and some effects, styles. That means a component comprises of presentation in HTML, logic in TypeScript, and styles in CSS. A component is a predefined template like with some functionalities. Now what happens is, actually whatever the functionality you need for this component, that you have to define through TypeScript logic. Presentation you have to do in HTML, and effects we need to bring from styles. We need to bring the effects from styles. And if some functionalities are very common, then you can keep them as services, so that you can inject without writing them every time. You can inject into your application, and you can give that particular functionality. That means what functionality you need, you can maintain as a service, so that it can be used across several components. Now a component is designed. Now this component is injected into your Angular application. That means whenever user requests your application, whenever a client requests your application, first an index page opens. In an index page will open. So every application starts with index page. In that index page, this component is injected, and we can access that component and see here. So your page contains set of components, and these components are loaded, and as per the user interactions the components can be changing. After one component another component will come. So generally we need to design them as pages. Suppose we have a login, we have register, we have some grid, about, contact, so many options are there. Usually we need to create pages, and we need to add the pages, and we need to access the pages. Now here there will not be just like page by page approach. It will be like component based. That means at a high level, I will clean this and show you. So we have a login component. We have a login component. We have a register component. We have a register component. Now, generally, the login component comprises of, usually that login component comprises of a design. That login component comprises of a design. That means this login component is having a HTML. So some user name and password. So we have text boxes for them. And we have button. So like login, like this. This is the design. And this is done in HTML. In HTML. Some effects are given to it. That means some colors and effects are given to it. These effects are done through CSS. Now this component requires some functionality. That means on login button click, on click I want to handle some functionality. That means we need some logic. This is done in TS, TypeScript. We write the logic. So that means every component is designed in this way. Now sometimes what happens is this login component requires some functionality. Actually, we have to write. We can write the functions and functionality. Sometimes some functionalities are very common, regularly used. Then we don't write. What we do, we create services. We create a service. So we create a login click as a service. So some service functions, we have login click. We have like get data. Some services are designed. So we have like insert products, something like this. Some services are designed. Now these services are having some functionality. Some functionality is written here. Some functionality is written here. Now we want these functionalities across various locations. Then what we can do is these services are injected. These services are injected into a component. So that it can access and use that service methods here. So instead of writing, you can import from services. You can inject the service and you can use it. A service contains reusable logic, a predefined logic, which you can inject into any component. So similarly, register component is having its own CSS, HTML, TypeScript, and it can get the functionality it can get the functionalities from the service and inject into it. So from where services get information actually, that means these functions are created by using modules. Modules will provide contracts. So modules will provide templates. What are contracts, templates? We know them. So module will provide all the classes and components which are all the classes which are implemented. So modules contains all this. So we import these modules and design these services. That means we implement the templates, we inject the classes, and we design the services. These services are injected into components. That means the rules, the templates for services are coming from modules. And the functionality for components is coming from services. Now these components we have to use in our Angular application. So we have an Angular application. In this Angular application, we have to use those components. That means we have an index page. Index.html. In this page, you have a navigation like login. You have a navigation like register. Now, when you click on that, that means now when you click login, this login component will come here and the login functionality be used here. When you click register, then register functionality will come here. That means user stays on only one page, that is index, and he can get access to everything onto that page. User will not navigate out of this page. It will not happen. So from begin to end, user stays on only one page and everything comes onto that page in the form of a component. And this is actually so the approach how Angular works, that is what actually the nature of SPA, single page application. That is the nature of single page application. That means a single page application means it doesn't mean that it will have one page. A single page application contains several pages. So for login, we have a HTML page. For register, we have a HTML page. For about, we have a HTML page. But it is not just HTML. It have HTML, CSS, and logic all combined into one component, which you can use in page. That means single page application environment is nothing but user will stay on one page and he will get access to everything onto that page. That is the nature of single page application. So technically, single page applications work with component based hierarchy. That means that is a component model actually. Components are the building blocks of Angular application. Angular application is built with components. And components gets the functionality from services. Services are built with modules. That is the basic hierarchy. So in Angular, when you are learning Angular, you need to learn how to design components, how to design services, how to configure the modules. And in addition to that, you need to learn so many things like how to handle the navigation in single page environment, how we can load the contents. And very important is when we are loading the components without reloading the complete page, we can load the new content. That means it uses asynchronous calls. That means it uses AJAX mechanism. So these services, modules, components all together are the key components of Angular application. So to build an Angular application, you need the complete infrastructure of this, right? It uses a lot of mechanism. We will understand about all those mechanisms one by one. It uses a lot of design patterns. It implements lazy loading. It implements the concept of routing. It implements AJAX. So various options are used here. It uses frameworks like MVC, MVP, MVVM, the frameworks like MVC, MVP, MVVM to handle all this. That's you are going to learn about them. This is just the basic high-level design. The basic high-level design. So that is what actually the Angular architecture is about. This is the Angular architecture. So we have the modules. Module components, so module services, so module functions, module values. That means a module for providing templates, a module for contracts and all. Already we designed modules. And these modules are injected into services. And services are injected into components. Now, what is advantage of this? Actually, it follows a modular approach. That means for this component, what services are required, only they are injected. So it uses a lazy loading mechanism. Lazy loading. You will see them all practically, how to handle them, how the modules are lazy loaded. So lazy loaded means it will load only when it is required. Eager loads will load even they are not used. So these components are presented into your application. These components are presented into your application. Actually, here the point is, here you can see some additional terms. This concept, this type of approach is not new for web developers. Means actually module, service, components, like concepts are not new for us. For example, suppose I am designing any HTML page. One of the main problem here is HTML page. We are using input type is equal to date. This will get a date picker. You can select the dates. But unfortunately, this is not supported on every browser. Every browser cannot show a date picker. That is the problem. That means every browser cannot show this. Browser compatibility issues will be there. That is the problem with browsers. So that means, for example, so I said some page. I'm designing some page. So let's go into the source of some page. I'm adding some page. Okay. In this page, some options here. So date of birth, some date of birth. And here I said input type is equal to date. And here I save this and I open with Chrome, like browser. In the Chrome browser, you can see there is a date picker. I can select a date from this date picker. I will open this. I will open this page in Internet Explorer. So in Internet Explorer browser, I'm opening that same page. And you can see here in Internet Explorer, there is no date picker. In Chrome, I have a date picker. I can choose a date. But in Internet Explorer, I don't have date picker coming here. That means the compatibility issues will be there. Now, if I want a date picker across every browser, now tell me, according to your knowledge, what should I do? If I want a date picker across all browsers, then what should I do? So if I want a date picker to run across the browsers, so what we should do? So we need to use external components from provided by third-party services. There is nothing one. See, if you talk like you write HTML, you write some standard HTML, that means first point, you don't know proper HTML. If you talk in that point, that means anybody who knows proper HTML, he knows that it is not possible through input type date. So we need to use actually. I was expecting the answers here. I was expecting the answers here, but all your answers are close and good and better, right? All your answers are better, but they are not hitting the technical point. They are not hitting the technical point which interviewer wants to know, because interviewer can classify you people whether you have experience or not, or whether you have a genuine experience or not, right? By understanding what the terms you speak out, right? All the words that you have given to me in your messages are good, but not satisfied as per technical level. Because a developer, if anyone asks like question like how do I solve this, then a developer should give an answer like better use a date widget. Better use a date widget. Have you ever heard about that widget? Right? Have you heard about widgets? Widgets are gadgets for our websites. Gadgets for our websites. We have widgets. That means better use a widget. Yes, better use a widget. Now the question is how I can get these widgets. How you can get these widgets. For that, you can use third-party implementations. Third party. Like HTML can't do that. You can get from jQuery UI. Have you heard about that? You can get from jQuery UI. You can get from Telerik. You can get from so many third parties for UI. So Telerik, jQuery UI, these are the very popular. These are very popular. Across you can use so many. Across you can use so many. For our Angular people, we use material. Angular materials. We use Angular material. So the point is, you have seen, suppose jQuery. I have jQuery jQuery UI. This is the official jQuery UI. And you can see in this left side, you have a widget. You have a widget. You see the category widgets. In the widgets, you have a date picker. And this date picker comes here. This date picker comes here. And it will provide a date when you click. And for that, very important is how this is designed. How this is designed. Can you tell what the combination used for it? What is the combination used for this? How it is designed? Can you tell the combination used for this? What is used to design such screen? So that I click inside, a pop-up comes and it will show. That means it is using combination of HTML, CSS, and jQuery or JavaScript. Am I right? Right? Yeah. Now this is what a component in our Angular. This is what a component in Angular. A component in Angular. Understood? It is what a component in Angular. That means here a component is a combination of three things. A component is built with three things. What are those? A component is built with three things. What are those? A component is built with HTML, CSS, and here TypeScript, not JavaScript. Am I right? But finally, TypeScript will be JavaScript converted into JavaScript, right? It will be converted into JavaScript. So, but we build by using HTML, CSS, and this. So that means now the point is it comprises of a template for presentation, logic for functionality, and style for effects. Understood? A template for presentation, logic for functionality, and effects for styles. Right? So that is what actually components are built with. Components are built with. Generally, I showed you just this jQuery widgets. There are so many. We have Telerik. This is Telerik. So we have jQuery, we have Telerik. This is Telerik. And you can see this Telerik provides components for you. It provides components for you. You can see web components, desktop components, mobile components. So they will provide predefined components, and these are third-party people. jQuery is free, but Telerik is not free. You have to buy, you have to purchase, and you have to use these components in your projects. Because in real-time projects, you have a lot of requirements from the client side. You cannot satisfy everything with what is available free. You cannot satisfy everything by writing the logic. You need a lot of implementations. Like you need a barcode reader, you need a QR code generator, you need a biometric reader, right? Yes, so many are there, several are there. And see Telerik, you can see this is Telerik, and see the customers of Telerik. NASA is customer of Telerik. Then you can understand their abilities. Microsoft is customer of Telerik. That means they provide software support, software components for NASA-like people, Microsoft-like people. Means Microsoft itself is a building company, and Microsoft is taking the support of Telerik for its component designs. That means that's great. That means this is at very high level. You can see that in the demos, you can see we have Angular demos. In our Angular demos, you can see they will provide data grids, charts, drop downs, themes. Many people ask this question like, sir, will you teach charts in Angular? Because they make a topic that without knowing that there are no built-in charts, we need to import everything from third party, right? So you need to know that everything is not available in your technologies. You need to import and use from third parties. And requirements will be varying depending on different. You can see these are all the components for Angular. So many components are provided for Angular. Now these components have a combination of HTML, CSS, and TypeScript. They have a combination of that. So a component is built with them, and these components are accessed and used there. So this is all you need to know. And Angular have a free component library called Material. Angular Material. That is a free Angular component library. This is a free Angular components for Angular. And you see the components. Here you have the components, different components. Suppose I want a date picker. You can see a date picker component comes here. I click here, it is working, and see the source. So it contains a HTML source. It contains a TypeScript source. And effects, they can come from, you can go to examples. In the examples, you can see the source. They come with HTML, TypeScript, and CSS. Every component is designed with these three. You can use the components. You can create your own components. That's what you are going to learn in Angular. In Angular, we are going to learn how to build our own components and how to use ready-made components, how to build our own services, and how to use ready-made services. These are the basic things we need to understand. And here comes the important point is, I hope you understood the hierarchy now. That means from the modules we inject into service, we build the functionality, we inject the services into components, and components are injected, and the component functionality is injected into your page. By using here, one more point will come here. How a component is injected into your page and used in your page by using directives. That means your Angular application have an index page. This index page is using directives. This directive contains the representation. Directive is a representation of a component with predefined functionality, predefined presentation, and predefined effects. That means how the components are injected and used in a page. How they are injected and used in a page by using directives. That means actually we have index.html. So we have index.html. So this index.html, this is having a static presentation. Now a directive comes here. So that means we use a directive, something like app login. By using this directive, we can import a login component here. We have a login component. This login component is injected into this. So this is a directive. So by using the directive, you are accessing the component and you are using the component. Now this component starts responding to your interactions. Directive have a lot of functionalities. A directive can be used in several ways actually. One is a directive is used in several ways. A directive is used as an element. A directive can be used as an element. Directive can be used as an attribute. Directive can be used as a class. Directive can be used as a comment also. You can use as a comment. These things you will learn step by step actually. Currently, I am using directive. This is directive. Currently, I am using as an element. So that whenever I write this element, it is going to return this markup. That means this is the markup. It is going to return that markup. Now, important, directives are used as attributes also. For example, suppose we have a service. In the service, we are having a functionality. Like we have an for. For is using an iteration and it is defining some functionality. In a service, we have a method which is using some iteration over any collection. Now what we can do here is we have a div. So or simply like suppose we have a list item li. I want this list item to iterate. If I want this list item to iterate, then I can use this iterator for, which is provided in this list item. Simply like I can write like ng for. I can access that function and I can use that functionality here. Now here ng for is a directive. Its functionality is coming from a service. And ng for is a directive. Technically it is a directive. Now this time it is not used as an element. It is used as an attribute. That means attribute of li. Li is an element. In the above, you can see directive is used as an element. Here directive is used as an attribute. That means what this directive can do. So it can convert this static HTML into dynamic. The static DOM element is converted into dynamic DOM. This is done by using these directives. A directive comes into your page and makes your static DOM into dynamic DOM. The static DOM is converted into dynamic DOM. That means a directive comes into your page and converts the static DOM into dynamic DOM. The process of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM, this process is called bootstrapping. Don't get confused with CSS bootstrap and Angular bootstrapping. CSS bootstrap is a repository of HTML, CSS templates. Angular bootstrapping, if anyone asks what is bootstrapping in Angular, so you should not talk about HTML, CSS bootstrap. In Angular, bootstrapping is a process of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM. That means the static HTML DOM is converted into dynamic DOM. It is converted into dynamic DOM by using a directive. Directive takes control over it and it handles the functionality. Now here the key point you need to know, here the key point is you have to know is every functionality is managed inside these angular braces. Am I right? Every functionality is managed inside these angular braces. Am I right? Am I right? Every functionality is managed inside these angular braces. What do you say? Right? Every functionality is managed inside these angular braces. Am I right? So that is the reason this technology is named as Angular. That is the reason it is named as Angular. Why you got the word Angular for this? What is the intention of naming it as Angular? Why you named it as Angular? So what is the intention of Angular? That means it does everything inside this Angular. Means it converts your static DOM into dynamic DOM inside this Angular. Every functionality is managed inside this Angular. So that is the reason why this technology got the name Angular. The intention of Angular is to tell that every functionality is managed inside this. Every functionality is managed. So that means you access the directives in this Angular. You define the directives in Angular. So that means everything at HTML level so is managed through this Angular. That means you can see the directive is used as an element. It is in Angular. So here ng for is used inside element, that is Angular, inside the Angular. It makes the static into dynamic. That is the reason this process, the process of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM is known as bootstrapping. Bootstrapping. So that is the reason. So in the basic architecture, when you look at the architecture, so here we have an option about directives. We have an option about directives. Directive means this directive is used in your page. This directive is used in the page. So we inject the directive into the page and we can start using the functionality. So what is event binding and property binding? Event binding and property binding is nothing but event binding, property binding, you know, property binding is used to send the data into the template, and event binding is used to handle the interactions from there. That means you click on button, you have a button click, we have a text box. Into the text box I need to send some value. Through property binding we can send that value, and on button click we need to collect the value. So on event binding we can identify the notifications, we can identify the changes, we can handle the functionality. That means components present the data and handle the interactions. Components present the data and handle the interactions by using two important binding techniques. What are those? What are those? Components present the data by using which binding? Components present the data by using which binding they present the data? What do you say? Property binding. Components handle the interactions by using event binding. That's it. So that is the basic point you need to know here. So that is the basic point you need to know. This is how your Angular actually high level works. Internal architecture, you will see later how the internal architecture works, because for that you need to start working with it. Once you start working with it, then you can handle it. So you can handle it, right? Internally, how it happens, everything we will discuss about. But at high level, so all the library is inside module. Inject and use define services. Inject the services into components. Now here you see one more extra option. What is metadata? I hope many of you know that. What is metadata? Now don't say data about data. Other than that, what do you say? Because that is a common answer. What is metadata means data about data, right? So technically, what is metadata? Metadata contains information about that particular component. Am I right? Information about that application. So which is used information about that application. Am I right? Information about that component. Information about the component. So that means, yeah, it contains information about the component, like from where HTML have to come, from where CSS have to come, which version of HTML to use, which version of CSS to use. Because metadata usually contains information about the resources, information about the versions, information about the cultures. All such information is present in metadata. And components have metadata which are used by compiler to understand about the component and access the component and use the component. The components and directives are accessed and used in your page with the help of their metadata. That is what actually this basic architecture is. So before starting with Angular, you need to understand the official basic architecture of Angular. Official basic architecture of Angular. And this is the official architecture of Angular. So this is what you generally find in the official architecture. So this is the basic architecture. And in this, the points we need to understand. So the points we need to understand. That means what is service, what is module, what is template, what is directive, what is property binding, what is event binding, what is component, what is metadata. These are the descriptions you need to understand. So once you know this, now you can start working with the application. That means now tell me, according to up to now what we discussed. So we have to design some screen, and we need to present some screen on the page. That means we have to design what? We need to design what? That means we need to start learning from designing. If I want some presentation on the screen, I want some functionality to design on the screen. What we have to design? What we have to design? So that means we need to start learning from designing a component. But actually, the component, we can directly design component, but some functionalities need to be regularly used across components. Then we have to design a service. Am I right? We need to design a service and we need to inject. Right? And the contracts for building that service are defined in modules. So now in Angular, first we will start working with components. Once we start learning with components, later we will learn how to inject the services into components, how to use the modules, how do we configure all of them and use them. Step by step, we will discuss about all these points now. Now we should practically start with the applications. Yes, we should practically start with that application. For that, we need to understand the location where components are present, where services are present, where modules are present, and how do we start with them. These are all things we need to understand, that we will discuss in our next session tomorrow. Right? This all description I will type about every component, and this all description on the component, right? All the description about these components I will post to you, right? All the description I will post you. Right? I will detailedly write all the description and I will post you. Right? Everything I will post you. So no need to worry about that. I will upload that document also. Right. So this entire concept step by step practically how it works, that we will see now. So that tomorrow session we will continue with this. Okay. So in tomorrow's session we will start working with this now. So practically you will see how to design